you know, I just don't understand the amount of delusion or bias, right? And so I started doing a little digging into his background, and I noticed that, people were having a hard time trying to find out his ethnic background. And that may be due to the fact that the mayor is adopted. He was adopted by pastors, two pastors. Now, it does not say whether or not the pastors who adopted him are family members of his, because they could be related to him, and they just adopted him due to whatever's going on with the parents or whatever. But it's not to minimize him or diminish anybody being adopted. The adoption process is a beautiful thing, and more people should do it. But he said something about growing up in a nice home and everything, and having pastors for parents, but how their home was always open to whomever, and how they had many children that they adopted, while he was there. So I'm thinking that this may be the reason that he is so biased when it comes to open borders. It's bias is really just like a distortion or a slant, right? A preconception, a prejudice, or a partiality, right? A bias or favoritism. Now, because he grew up raised by adopted parents and living in a home that was so open, he may see things through the color lenses of, we should always have an open door. I grew up, everybody was allowed, to come in. um there was no limited. The house was always packed. It was always full of people. It was only 3 bedrooms, so space had to be limited. 3 bedroom home, so space had to be limited or whatever. But it just didn't seem to bother his parents or whatever like that. So maybe that has some effect on him, and that's why he views Chicago as just, it should be just an open door, because his home where he grew up at was an open door. And so that may be that may have some influence or whatever. But it's ridiculous to think that you can look at things from the way you grew up and base a city who's been hemorrhaging people. Like, people have been getting slaughtered in Chicago since the late 60s. And to not have any compassion towards that, but you have all this compassion for illegal aliens. There's definitely some bias going on there. We also need to look at the fact of maybe he doesn't really care for American Negroes. Maybe he doesn't really care. He was adopted. Maybe he felt abandoned by his original parents, and he holds some type of vendetta, against them, because people will do that. You have people who are in our community who have been, men who have been wounded by some women or whatever, and you hear them today. They spew all type of disgusting things about black women because some black woman hurt them. So hurt people, and I do believe that that is why he is just disregarding Flip Red, Chicago's Flip Red, which are the American Negroes out in Chicago, advocating for, the illegals to go, and for safe streets and prosperity for themselves, which they should be doing. And he is just totally against that. He's okay with it for everybody else. Everybody should be provided for. Everybody else except them. So, there may be some type of psychological, chemical imbalance here when it comes to how he views, immigration, and how he views, the American people of that city. But the 80 million people voted for President Trump. So it really doesn't make sense to continue to obstruct President Trump's policies. I hope the man gets some help for himself, because he is clearly delusional. The amount of delusion, when he's speaking, and when people are trying to talk to him, people are pleading. I've seen, our people plead before this man, please do something to stop this, do something to help us, look out for us, do something for us. And he just totally, you know, the way he just looks, like it doesn't even bother him. He laughs at times when they are talking about, their hardships, their economic hardships, and, the challenges that they're suffering in their communities. This guy laughs. He always has a smirk on his face when black people are before him expressing their hard times. And I find it to be very disgusting. I wish people would have went with Wilson. I don't know why people kind of in Chicago turned their nose up at Wilson. I don't know if because he's a millionaire, because he's a little bit country. I don't know what it was about Wilson that they didn't embrace, but you would have been way better off. The people of Chicago would have been better off going with Wilson than Brandon Johnson. I don't know what it is you saw in this guy, but you guys made a mistake, and so now you're doing better out there. You flip red, and I think you guys will be more cautious with more with the upcoming elections. I'll say it like that. But yeah, this guy is he's losing support, and allegedly it just came out that Governor Pritzker is kind of turning his back on Mayor Johnson. So you know the only thing we could do is wait and see. But it's a good theory. You can check out his records or whatever. Maybe some people want to do some deep diving into that. That would be very interesting or whatever. But that's just my theory that, sometimes when people are separated from their parents and they don't have that connection to their parents, they didn't get that nurturing and that bonding that helps you, to kind of look at things that other people experience with compassion, when you have that love and that nurturing and whatever. And if you have a packed house and you have pastors, people are busy, and to have all that traffic, maybe he didn't get the attention that he needed and the nurturing that he needed. It doesn't, he doesn't display that he kind of got that nurturing when it comes to dealing with his own people. So that's my take on it, guys. I am Man Eater 38.